The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Adelaide Cottage, casting long shadows across the breakfast table where Catherine, Princess of Wales, sat quietly, stirring her tea. The golden light that once brought her such joy now seemed to mock the growing darkness she felt spreading through her body. 3 months had passed since the diagnosis, and despite the brave face she wore for the cameras and her children, Kate knew the battle ahead would be unlike anything she had ever faced. William entered the kitchen, his footsteps careful and measured, as if walking too loudly might somehow make everything more real. He had learned to read the subtle changes in his wife's posture, the way she held her shoulders when the pain was manageable versus when it threatened to overwhelm her. This morning, he noticed the slight tremor in her hand as she lifted the cup to her lips. "The children are asking about the picnic we promised," he said softly, settling into the chair beside her. Their voices had become gentler with each other in recent weeks, as if harsh words might somehow accelerate what was already in motion. Kate smiled, and for a moment, William saw glimpses of the woman who had captured his heart at university. "We should go," she said. "The weather forecast looks perfect for Saturday." They both knew it might be one of their last family outings where Kate would have the energy to truly participate, but neither voiced this thought. Instead, they planned the day with careful attention to every detail, as if the perfect picnic might somehow hold back time itself. The diagnosis had come after weeks of persistent fatigue that Kate had initially attributed to her demanding schedule. As a working mother and senior member of the royal family, exhaustion seemed like an occupational hazard. But when simple tasks became monumental efforts, and when even her morning runs left her breathless and dizzy, she finally agreed to see the royal physicians. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the oncologist who delivered the news, had been gentle but direct. The cancer was aggressive and had already spread beyond its initial site. While treatment options existed, the prognosis was guarded at best. Kate had listened with the same composure she displayed during state dinners and charity galas, asking practical questions about timelines and treatment protocols. William had been less composed. When they left the doctor's office, he had driven aimlessly through London streets for over an hour, neither of them speaking. Kate had watched the familiar landmarks blur past the window, thinking about all the conversations they would need to have, all the preparations they would need to make. The hardest part had been telling the children. George, at 11, was old enough to understand the gravity of the situation, though they had softened the edges of the truth. Charlotte, 9, had asked if Mummy would still be able to help her with her school project about butterflies. Louis, at 6, had simply climbed into Kate's lap and stayed there for the rest of the evening. King Charles, having faced his own cancer diagnosis earlier that year, had been a source of unexpected strength. His recovery had given the family hope, but privately, Kate's doctors had explained that her situation was fundamentally different. Charles's cancer had been caught early. Hers had not been so accommodating. The palace communications team had crafted a careful statement about Kate stepping back from public duties to focus on her health. The public response had been overwhelming, with flowers and well wishes arriving daily from around the world. Kate found comfort in reading some of the letters, particularly those from other women facing similar battles. Their words reminded her that even in her privileged position, she was not alone in this fight. As the days passed, William found himself studying his wife with new intensity, memorizing the way she laughed at their children's jokes, the concentration on her face when she read, the gentle way she tucked Charlotte's hair behind her ear. He had always been aware of how precious their time together was, given the demands of royal life. But now each moment carried additional weight. Kate, meanwhile, began organizing her life with characteristic efficiency. She created detailed notes about the children's preferences, their fears, their dreams. She recorded videos of herself reading their favorite bedtime stories. She wrote letters to be opened on future birthdays and important milestones. It was her way of maintaining control in a situation that felt increasingly uncontrollable. The treatment began in earnest, bringing with it the familiar routine of hospital visits and the harsh reality of chemotherapy side effects. Kate approached it with the same determination she had brought to her royal duties, viewing each session as another obligation to fulfill. William rarely left her side during these appointments, working from his laptop in uncomfortable hospital chairs, fielding calls about his royal engagements while keeping one eye on his wife. Their relationship began to develop new rhythms. Conversations became more precious, with less time wasted on trivial matters. They found themselves talking about things they had never discussed before. Their hopes for the children's futures, their regrets about paths not taken, their gratitude for the life they had built together. One evening, as they sat together in the garden watching the children play, Kate reached for William's hand. "I want you to know," she said quietly, "that loving you and building this family has been the greatest privilege of my life." William squeezed her fingers, unable to trust his voice to respond. He had always been the more emotionally reserved of the two, but Kate's illness was stripping away his carefully constructed barriers. The thought of losing her felt like contemplating the loss of his better half, the person who had made him not just a better man, but a more complete one. The palace had arranged for the best possible care, with specialists flying in from around the world for consultations. But as the weeks passed, it became clear that medical expertise alone would not be enough. Kate's body, which had always been strong and reliable, was betraying her in ways that no amount of determination could overcome. She began to tire more easily, needing afternoon rest that stretched longer each day. Her appetite diminished, and clothes that had once fit perfectly now hung loose on her shrinking frame. Yet she continued to smile for the children, to ask about their school days, to maintain the routines that provided stability in an increasingly uncertain world. William found himself taking on more of the daily parenting responsibilities, something he had always shared with Kate, but now carried almost entirely alone. He helped with homework, braided Charlotte's hair for school, and listened to George's increasingly complex questions about life and death. The children seemed to sense that something fundamental was changing, even as their parents tried to maintain normalcy. The extended royal family rallied around them with quiet support. Princess and visited regularly, bringing her practical wisdom and dry humor. The queen consort, Camilla, shared insights from her own experience supporting Charles through his treatment. Even Harry reached out from California, their long-standing rift temporarily set aside in the face of family crisis. As autumn approached, Kate made the difficult decision to step back from almost all public appearances. The announcement was carefully worded, speaking of the need to focus on family time and recovery. The media speculated endlessly about the true state of her health, but the palace maintained its dignified silence. During these quieter days, Kate and William rediscovered simple pleasures they had forgotten in their busy royal lives. They played board games with the children, watched old movies together, and took slow walks through the grounds of their various residences. Kate began teaching Charlotte to bake, passing down recipes and techniques with an urgency that wasn't lost on William. The nights were often the hardest. When the children were asleep and the official business of the day was done, reality would settle around them like a heavy blanket. They would lie in bed, talking softly about everything and nothing, sometimes until dawn broke over the horizon. These conversations became sacred to them, a private space where they could acknowledge their fears without having to be strong for anyone else. Kate's medical team adjusted treatment protocols as her condition evolved, but the underlying truth remained unchanged. They were buying time, not providing a cure. Kate faced this reality with remarkable grace. Though William sometimes caught glimpses of the fear she worked so hard to hide. In those moments, he would simply hold her, offering the comfort of his presence when words fell short. The children began to understand that their mother's illness was serious. George started staying closer to home, declining invitations to friends' houses that would have once excited him. Charlotte became more helpful around the house, taking on small responsibilities without being asked. Louis, with the resilience of childhood, continued to believe that Mummy would get better soon, a faith that both comforted and broke his parents' hearts. As winter approached, the family faced the reality that this might be Kate's last Christmas with them. Rather than despair, this knowledge brought a fierce intensity to their preparations. Every tradition took on heightened significance. Every moment together was consciously treasured. They were creating memories while simultaneously grieving their limited future, a paradox that defined their days. The palace continued to function around them, with staff maintaining the careful balance between official duties and personal crisis. Statements were prepared and adjusted, schedules were quietly rearranged, and contingency plans were discussed in hushed tones. The institution that had shaped their lives was now adapting to accommodate their most private struggle. Through it all, the bond between William and Kate only grew stronger. Adversity stripped away everything unnecessary, leaving only the essential truth of their love for each other and their children. They discovered reserves of strength they hadn't known they possessed, and found that facing the unthinkable became slightly more bearable when done together. The story of their journey was just beginning, but already it was clear that their love would leave an indelible mark on all who witnessed it. In choosing to face her illness with grace and dignity, Kate was teaching her family and the world about courage in its purest form. And in choosing to stand beside her every step of the way, William was demonstrating the true meaning of the vows they had spoken in Westminster Abbey all those years ago. As the first part of their journey drew to a close, one thing remained certain. Their love story, which had begun with such promise and joy, would end with the same courage and dignity that had defined their lives together. The wordless goodbye that would eventually come was already beginning, spoken in every gentle touch, every meaningful glance, and every precious moment they chose to share rather than simply endure. Winter settled over England like a gentle blanket, bringing with it the kind of crisp mornings that Kate had always loved. From her bedroom window at Amber Hall, she could see frost coating the bare branches of the oak trees that had stood sentinel over their Norfolk home for generations. The children's voices drifted up from the garden where they were building what Charlotte insisted would be the world's most magnificent snowman. The past few months had taught Kate to measure time differently. No longer did she think in terms of weeks or seasons, but in moments of clarity between treatments, in afternoons when she felt strong enough to read to Lewis, in evenings when she and William could still laugh together at some shared memory. Each good day felt like a gift to be unwrapped carefully and savored completely. William had become her anchor in ways she hadn't expected. Always naturally protective, he had evolved into something more, a guardian of her energy, a translator of her needs when she became too tired to voice them, a keeper of normalcy for their children. She watched him adapt to his new role with the same quiet competence he brought to everything in his life, though she could see the toll it was taking in the shadows under his eyes, and the way his smile sometimes took a moment too long to reach them. Dr. Mitchell's latest visit had brought news that wasn't entirely unexpected, but still landed like a physical blow. The treatments that had initially shown promise were becoming less effective. Kate's body, which had fought so valiantly for months, was beginning to tire. They needed to start thinking about comfort care, about making the time that remained as meaningful as possible. Kate had received this information with the same composure she brought to receiving foreign dignitaries, asking practical questions about pain management and timelines. But that night, alone with William, she had finally allowed herself to cry, not for herself, but for all the tomorrows she would miss with her children. William had held her as she grieved for school plays she wouldn't attend, weddings she wouldn't plan, grandchildren she would never meet. "I keep thinking about Charlotte's wedding day," Kate whispered against William's chest. "I had this vision of helping her get ready, of being there when she walks down the aisle." William stroked her hair, now thin from chemotherapy, but still beautiful to him. "She'll carry you with her," he said softly. "They all will. Love doesn't end just because we can't see each other anymore." It was during these quiet conversations that they began to plan for a future Kate wouldn't be part of. They talked about how to help the children remember her, about the values she wanted to instill in them, about the woman she hoped Charlotte would become, and the men she wanted George and Louis to grow into. These discussions were heartbreaking and healing in equal measure. Kate threw herself into creating lasting memories with an intensity that both amazed and worried William. She organized photo sessions with each child individually, recording videos of herself singing their favorite lullabies and writing detailed letters for milestone birthdays years in the future. She worked with the palace archivist to create a comprehensive record of their family life, ensuring that the children would have tangible reminders of her love. The children, with the intuitive wisdom that often comes naturally to the young, began to understand that their time with their mother was precious. George started joining Kate for her morning tea, sitting quietly beside her as she read or simply watched the sunrise. These moments together required no words. They communicated through shared silence and gentle touches. Charlotte became Kate's helper in ways that broke and mended William's heart simultaneously. She would bring her mother pillows without being asked, sit beside her during treatment rest periods, and chatter about school in a deliberately cheerful voice that suggested she understood more than she was letting on. Sometimes William would find them together, Charlotte braiding the remaining strands of Kate's hair with careful concentration. Louis, still so young, provided moments of pure joy that cut through the sadness like sunlight through storm clouds. His belief that his mother would get better remained unshaken, and his innocent questions about when she would be all done being sick served as painful reminders of the innocence that would soon be lost. The palace staff, many of whom had worked with the family for years, began to show their love in small but meaningful ways. Maria, Kate's longtime dresser, would bring flowers from her own garden and arrange them in Kate's room. The security team made sure the children could play freely in the gardens without feeling watched or protected. The household staff worked quietly to maintain the rhythms of family life, understanding that normalcy had become a form of medicine. As Christmas approached, Kate made the difficult decision to spend the holiday privately at Sandringham, away from the larger family gathering. She wanted to focus entirely on her children, to give them a Christmas that would shine brightly in their memories during the darker days ahead. William supported this decision, though he knew it would disappoint other family members who wanted to spend time with Kate while they still could. The preparations for Christmas took on heightened significance. Kate involved herself in every detail she could manage, from selecting gifts to planning the Christmas Eve dinner menu. She wanted everything to be perfect, to create a celebration that would serve as a template for Christmases to come when she wouldn't be there to organize them. On Christmas morning, the family opened presents in Kate's bedroom, gathering around her bed as they had in the early days when the children were small. Kate watched William help Louis with his new building set, saw Charlotte carefully arrange her art supplies, and noticed George trying to hide his concern when he thought she looked tired. The joy was real, but it was edged with a poignancy that made every moment feel simultaneously perfect and heartbreaking. The new year brought a subtle shift in the household. Kate's good days became less frequent, and her need for rest increased. But rather than retreat from life, she seemed to embrace it more fully during the times when she felt well. She would insist on helping with homework even when she could barely sit up, would ask William to carry her to the garden on sunny afternoons, and would gather the children around her bed to tell them stories about her own childhood. William found himself becoming the family's memory keeper, documenting everything with photos and videos, writing down the funny things the children said, preserving the ordinary moments that he knew would become precious beyond measure. He understood that someday these small details would be all they had left of this time together. The children's friends and teachers at school began to understand that something serious was happening, though the family maintained their privacy about the specific details. The school administration quietly arranged for additional support when needed, and other parents showed their kindness through small gestures like offering to help with carpools or inviting the children for playdates. Kate's relationship with each child deepened in unique ways during this time. With George, she focused on preparing him for his future role, talking about the responsibilities and privileges that would someday be his. She emphasized the importance of kindness, of using his position to help others, of never forgetting where he came from. With Charlotte, she shared woman-to-woman wisdom, talking about confidence and compassion, about standing up for what's right even when it's difficult. She gave her daughter a locket that had belonged to Diana, explaining its history and the strength of the women who had worn it before. With Louis, she simply loved fiercely, holding him close during his afternoon naps, singing to him at bedtime, and making sure he felt cherished and secure. She knew that his memories of this time would be fuzzy, but she hoped the feeling of being unconditionally loved would remain with him always. William and Kate's relationship evolved too, moving beyond the roles of husband and wife into something deeper and more essential. They became each other's witnesses, bearing testimony to a love that had survived royal protocol, media scrutiny, and now terminal illness. Their conversations grew more philosophical, touching on questions of meaning and legacy, of faith and fear. "Do you think we did enough?" Kate asked one evening as they sat together watching the sunset through their bedroom window. She was thinking about their years together, about the balance between royal duty and family life, about the choices they had made. "We loved each other completely," William replied, taking her hand in his. "We raised 3 incredible children. We try to make the world a little better. I think that's more than enough." The palace began to make quiet preparations for what everyone understood was coming, though no official announcements were made. Plans were discussed in hushed tones, protocols were reviewed, and arrangements were put in place to support the family when the time came. The institution that had sometimes felt constraining now provided structure and support that William found invaluable. Kate's parents, Michael and Carol Middleton, became daily fixtures in the household, providing the kind of practical support and unconditional love that only parents can offer. They helped with school runs, stayed with the children when William needed to attend to royal duties, and simply sat with Kate when she wanted company but was too tired to talk. Pippa and James, Kate's siblings, also stepped in to help maintain connections to Kate's pre-royal life. They brought news from friends, shared memories from their childhood, and helped the children understand their mother not just as a princess, but as a sister who had once been young and carefree. As winter gradually gave way to early spring, Kate began to speak more openly about the future she wouldn't see. These conversations weren't morbid, but rather practical and loving, a mother's final gift to her family. She talked about how proud she was of the people her children were becoming, about her hopes for William's future happiness, about the legacy she hoped their love would leave. The wordless goodbye was taking shape in these daily interactions, in a way Kate squeezed William's hand when words weren't enough, in how she held each child a little longer during hugs, in the meaningful looks she shared with her family when she thought they weren't watching. Love was being expressed through presence rather than promises, through being fully in each moment rather than dwelling on all the moments they wouldn't have. Through it all, Kate maintained the grace and dignity that had defined her public life. Even as her body grew weaker, her spirit remained strong, focused not on what she was losing, but on what she was leaving behind. A family bound together by unbreakable love, children who knew they were cherished beyond measure, and a husband who had been shown the truest meaning of partnership. The second phase of their journey was drawing to a close, but the love that had sustained them through the darkest days continued to shine brightly, illuminating the path forward for a family learning to love each other in new and deeper ways. Spring arrived earlier than usual that year, bringing with it daffodils that pushed through the earth with determined cheerfulness. Kate watched them bloom from her bedroom window, finding comfort in the eternal cycle of renewal even as she faced her own ending. The irony wasn't lost on her, that as the world awakened to new life, she was preparing to leave it behind. The transition to palliative care had been gentler than anyone expected. Dr. Mitchell and her team had arranged for Kate to be comfortable at home, surrounded by the people and places she loved most. The medical equipment that now filled corners of their bedroom was unobtrusive, designed to support rather than intrude upon the family life that continued to flow around Kate's bedside. William had surprised everyone, including himself, with how naturally he adapted to being Kate's primary caregiver. The man who had once needed a valet to tie his shoes now managed medication schedules, coordinated care visits, and helped Kate with the most intimate aspects of daily living. He performed these tasks with a tenderness that spoke of love translated into action, dignity preserved through service. The children had settled into new routines that accommodated their mother's changing needs. They did homework in Kate's room, had their bedtime stories read from the chair beside her bed, and learned to gauge their mother's energy levels with a sensitivity that broke William's heart. They were growing up too fast, but they were growing up with an understanding of love's true nature that many adults never achieved. George had become the family's small protector, making sure Louis spoke quietly in the morning so Mummy could rest, helping Charlotte understand when Kate needed space for medical care, and somehow knowing when his presence was needed versus when he should give his parents privacy. At 12, he carried responsibilities that seemed enormous. Yet he bore them with a maturity that reminded William powerfully of Kate herself. Charlotte threw herself into caring for her mother with characteristic determination. She learned to braid Kate's increasingly thin hair, became expert at preparing the gentle foods that Kate could still manage to eat, and appointed herself as the family's keeper of cheerful stories. Her school artwork now decorated Kate's bedside table, bright splashes of color in a room growing shadowy with sadness. Louis, now 7, adapted to the changes with the flexibility of childhood, though William could see the confusion in his youngest son's eyes. Louis still believed, with fierce childhood faith, that mothers didn't leave their children, that love was strong enough to overcome anything. His innocent questions about when Kate would be all better served as daily reminders of the conversations that would soon need to happen. The extended royal family had rallied around them with unprecedented unity. King Charles visited almost daily, bringing with him not just the comfort of family, but the wisdom of someone who understood the weight of loss. He would sit quietly with Kate, sometimes reading to her from books of poetry, other times simply holding her hand while she dozed. His own recent battle with cancer had given him insights into both the fear and acceptance that came with serious illness. Queen Camilla proved to be an unexpected source of strength, arriving each week with fresh flowers from the gardens at Highgrove and an endless supply of gentle conversation. She had learned, through years of supporting Charles, how to be present without overwhelming, how to help without taking over. Her experience in blending families made her particularly attuned to the children's needs. Princess and brought practical support with characteristic efficiency, coordinating with palace staff to ensure that William could focus entirely on Kate and the children. She managed schedules, fielded calls, and somehow made sure that normal life continued functioning around the edges of their crisis. Her dry humor and no-nonsense attitude provided relief from the emotional intensity that otherwise filled every corner of the house. Even Harry had found ways to be present despite the distance, calling regularly to speak with Kate and the children, sending care packages filled with treats and small gifts that brightened difficult days. The old tensions that had divided the brothers seemed irrelevant in the face of losing someone they both loved. Kate, who had always hoped for reconciliation, found peace in seeing her family united, even if it had taken her illness to bring them together. The palace staff had become extended family, each contributing to Kate's comfort in their own way. Her longtime dresser, Maria, now helped Kate choose comfortable clothes for each day, adjusting beautiful outfits to accommodate medical equipment with creativity and care. The security team created a buffer of privacy around the house, ensuring that the family's final months together remained truly private. Even the gardeners seemed to understand their role, keeping the grounds beautiful so that Kate's view from the window remained lovely. Kate's parents had essentially moved in, providing the kind of unconditional support that only parents can offer. Carol spent hours simply sitting with her daughter, sometimes talking about memories from Kate's childhood, other times working quietly on needlepoint while Kate rested. Michael took over many of the practical aspects of running the household, his business background proving useful in coordinating care and managing logistics. Pippa visited regularly, bringing news from the outside world and maintaining connections to Kate's life before royalty. She would curl up on Kate's bed like they were teenagers again, gossiping about mutual friends and sharing stories that made Kate laugh until she was too tired to continue. These visits provided precious reminders of Kate's identity beyond her roles as wife, mother, and princess. James, quieter by nature, contributed through his simple presence and his ability to make Kate smile. He would arrive with photographs from his recent adventures, sharing stories of places Kate would never see but could experience through his eyes. His visits were islands of lightness in days that were growing increasingly heavy. As spring progressed, Kate began the delicate process of preparing her children for a future without her. These conversations were carefully calibrated to their ages and understanding, designed to provide comfort rather than fear. She talked about how love doesn't disappear when people die, how she would always be with them in their hearts, how proud she was of the people they were becoming. With George, she focused on his future responsibilities, not just as a member of the royal family, but as a big brother and eventually a father himself. "Take care of them," she said during one of their quiet morning conversations. "Not because you have to, but because love means taking care of each other." With Charlotte, she emphasized strength and independence, encouraging her daughter to pursue her dreams fearlessly while remaining kind to others. "You have everything you need inside you already," Kate told her. "Trust yourself, and remember that being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing what's right even when you are scared." With Louis, she simply poured love into every interaction, knowing that his memories of this time might fade, but hoping that the feeling of being cherished would remain. She sang to him more than ever, held him during his afternoon rest times, and made sure that her face was the last thing he saw before falling asleep each night. William found himself documenting everything with urgent intensity, recording Kate's voice reading bedtime stories, photographing the way she looked when she laughed at the children's jokes, writing down her exact words during important conversations. He understood that these fragments would need to sustain his family for decades to come. The couple's own relationship had evolved into something transcendent during these final months. Physical intimacy had been replaced by emotional intimacy, so profound that they could communicate entire conversations with a glance. They had moved beyond the fear of loss into a space of pure gratitude for what they had shared. "I need you to promise me something," Kate said one evening as William helped her settle into bed. "When I'm gone, I need you to live, really live. Not just survive, not just fulfill duties. I need you to find happiness again." William struggled with this request, unable to imagine a future where happiness existed without her. But he understood what she was asking, that he honored their love not by remaining trapped in grief, but by living fully for both of them. Kate had also begun having individual conversations with key people in her life, saying goodbyes that weren't officially goodbyes, but that everyone understood might be final. She spoke with longtime friends about memories they'd made together, thanked staff members who had served her family faithfully, and somehow found ways to express gratitude even to people who had criticized her over the years. The media attention had shifted during these months, from intrusive speculation to respectful distance. Photographers stopped trying to capture glimpses of the family, understanding instinctively that some moments were too private for public consumption. The press coverage focused instead on Kate's legacy, her charitable work, and the impact she had made during her time as a working royal. As May arrived, bringing with it the kind of perfect English weather that Kate had always loved, it became clear that time was growing short. Kate's periods of wakefulness became briefer, Her need for pain management increased, and the family began to understand that their final conversations might happen at any moment. Yet somehow, peace settled over the household like a blessing. The desperate fighting against fate had given way to acceptance, and with acceptance came a strange kind of serenity. Kate had done everything she could to prepare her family for life without her. She had loved them as completely as possible, created memories to sustain them, and shown them through her own example how to face the unthinkable with grace. The children seemed to sense the shift, becoming more gentle with their mother, more patient with each other, more attentive to the precious nature of their remaining time together. They were learning, through the hardest possible circumstances, that love is not measured in length of time, but in depth of connection. William marveled at his wife's strength, even as her body grew weaker. She continued to find energy for the moments that mattered most: birthday celebrations for the children, quiet talks with each of them about their hopes and dreams, final instructions about how she wanted to be remembered. The wordless goodbye was happening in hundreds of small moments. In the way Kate's hand sought William's when pain overwhelmed her, in how she would catch each child's eye during family dinners, and smile with such intensity that they understood she was memorizing their faces, in the peaceful expression that settled over her features when she thought no one was watching. As spring deepened into early summer, the family faced the approaching farewell with courage that surprised everyone, including themselves. They had learned that love could transform even the darkest experiences into something meaningful, that grace was possible even in the face of devastating loss, and that some goodbyes, while heartbreaking, could also be beautiful. The third phase of their journey was complete, and while the hardest part lay ahead, they faced it together, bound by love that had proven stronger than fear, more enduring than time, and more powerful than death itself. The summer of Kate's last days arrived with unusual gentleness, bringing warm breezes that stirred the curtains in her bedroom and filled the house with the scent of roses from the gardens she had lovingly tended. Through her window, she could see the children playing on the lawn, their laughter carrying on the afternoon air like music from another world. She was present for these moments, yet somehow already distant, existing in that liminal space between life and whatever comes after. William had not left her side in days, sleeping in the chair beside her bed, holding her hand through the long nights when sleep eluded them both. The palace had canceled all his engagements indefinitely, understanding without being told that his place was here, in this room, bearing witness to love's final act. He looked tired beyond his years, yet somehow more himself than ever before, stripped of every pretense except the fundamental truth of his devotion. The children had adapted to their mother's changing condition with a remarkable resilience that sometimes emerges in the young when faced with the incomprehensible. They would climb carefully onto her bed in the mornings, curling against her like puppies seeking warmth, and she would stroke their hair with fingers that grew weaker each day, but never stopped offering comfort. George, now 13 and bearing responsibilities no child should carry, had become the family's small sentinel. He monitored his mother's breathing, adjusted her pillows without being asked, and somehow knew when she needed water or when the light was bothering her eyes. His intuitive caregiving broke William's heart while simultaneously filling him with pride. Kate had always said that George would grow into a fine man. That future had arrived far too early. Charlotte continued to bring her mother small gifts, drawings from school, flowers picked from the garden, stories about her friends as she whispered close to Kate's ear. She seemed to understand that her voice was now one of the most important sounds in her mother's world, and she used it generously, filling the quiet room with tales of ordinary magic that kept Kate tethered to life's sweetness. Louis, at 8, remained the family's ray of sunshine, though even his bright spirit showed signs of dimming as he struggled to understand why Mummy slept so much and spoke so softly. He would bring her his favorite stuffed animals to keep her company, arrange his toy cars on her bedside table to keep her safe, and climb in a bed beside her for afternoon naps that had become sacred time for both of them. Dr. Mitchell visited daily now, her medical expertise secondary to her role as compassionate witness to the family's journey. She had delivered difficult news to many families over the years, but something about Kate's grace in facing death and William's steadfast presence had touched her deeply. She found herself staying longer than necessary, drawn by the atmosphere of love that pervaded even the darkest moments. The extended family had arranged themselves around Kate's bedside like petals of a flower, each contributing their presence to the circle of love that surrounded her. King Charles sat quietly reading poetry aloud, his voice carrying the same rhythms that had comforted William as a child. Queen Camilla brought fresh flowers daily, and somehow knew exactly when to speak and when to simply hold space for silence. Princess Anne handled practical matters with efficient compassion, ensuring that everything Kate might need was anticipated and arranged. Her presence provided stability for William, who found comfort in his aunt's no-nonsense approach to life's most difficult moments. She had helped him navigate his mother's death years before. Now she stood ready to support him through another devastating loss. Even Harry had found his way home, arriving quietly one evening without fanfare or media attention. The reunion with his brother was wordless but profound. Years of tension dissolved in the face of shared love for Kate and mutual understanding of impending loss. Kate's eyes had filled with tears of joy when she saw him, her voice barely a whisper as she said, "You came." Kate's parents maintained their vigil with the quiet strength that had shaped their daughter's character. Carol would sit for hours holding Kate's hand, sometimes humming lullabies from Kate's childhood, other times sharing memories in voices soft enough not to disturb but clear enough for Kate to hear and find comfort in the familiar rhythms of her mother's love. Michael had taken over many household responsibilities, his business acumen proving valuable in coordinating the complex logistics of caring for someone in Kate's condition. But, more importantly, his presence provided the security of unconditional paternal love, the knowledge that Kate was surrounded by people who had loved her long before she was a princess and would continue loving her memory long after she was gone. Pippa and James visited daily, bringing news from the outside world, but more importantly maintaining Kate's connection to her identity beyond royal duties. They shared gossip and family news, reminded her of inside jokes and childhood adventures, and helped her remember the girl she had been before the weight of crown and duty changed her life. The palace staff had become an extended family during these final days, each finding ways to contribute to Kate's comfort and the family support. Maria would quietly arrange Kate's remaining hair each morning, ensuring she felt beautiful even when she felt weak. The security team maintained their protection while allowing the family complete privacy, understanding that their role now extended beyond physical safety to emotional sanctuary. As the days grew longer and Kate grew weaker, conversations became increasingly precious. Words were carefully chosen, spoken softly, and received with gratitude by everyone present. Kate used her remaining energy to offer final guidance to her children, last expressions of love to her husband, and gracious thanks to everyone who had supported their family. "I want you to remember," she whispered to the children during one of their bedside gatherings, "that love is the only thing that really matters. Be kind to each other, take care of each other, and know that I will always be with you in every act of love you show." To William, she offered promises wrapped in hope. Find happiness again. Let the children see you laugh. Show them that our love was strong enough to survive even this. Her words came slowly, each one carefully chosen and delivered with the last of her strength. The wordless goodbye had been building for weeks, communicated through touches and glances, through the way Kate's eyes would seek out each family member during quiet moments, memorizing faces and storing them for whatever journey lay ahead. Now, as her voice grew fainter and her periods of wakefulness shorter, the goodbye became more urgent and more gentle simultaneously. William found himself talking to Kate about their shared memories, reminding her of their first meeting at university, their wedding day, the births of their children, moments of ordinary happiness that had defined their life together. He wasn't sure she could still hear him clearly, but her hand would squeeze his gently, and her breathing would settle into peaceful rhythms that told him she was comforted by his voice. The children seemed to understand, without being told explicitly, that their time for final conversations with their mother was limited. George took to sitting beside her bed in the evenings, sometimes reading to her from books she had loved, other times simply holding her hand and telling her about his day at school. Charlotte would sing softly, songs they had shared during car rides and bedtime routines, her young voice carrying melodies that seemed to ease Kate's discomfort. Louis, too young to fully grasp the permanence of what was coming, continued to treat these moments as temporary, talking to his mother about plans for tomorrow, and next week, his innocent optimism providing a counterpoint to the sadness that filled the room. Kate's face would brighten during these conversations, as if Louis's faith in the future was medicine for her weary spirit. One evening in late June, as golden sunlight streamed through the bedroom windows and filled the room with warm light, Kate seemed to rally slightly. Her eyes were clearer than they had been in days, and she asked William to gather everyone together. When the family had assembled around her bed, children, parents, siblings, and closest friends, she looked at each face with love so profound it seemed to light her from within. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely audible but crystal clear in the hushed room. "For everything. For loving me so completely. For making my life beautiful beyond anything I could have imagined." She paused, gathering strength for her final words. "Take care of each other. Remember that love never really ends. It just changes form." The silence that followed was not empty but full, charged with love and grief and gratitude all existing simultaneously. No one spoke because no words could adequately respond to such grace, such generous final thoughts from someone facing her own ending. Instead, they simply remained present, offering their love as witness to hers. Over the next 2 days, Kate drifted in and out of consciousness, but even in sleep, she seemed to be aware of the people around her. William never left her side, holding her hand through day and night, whispering words of love and gratitude into her ear, ensuring that the last voice she heard would be his telling her how precious she was, how grateful he was for their time together, how their love would continue in their children. The children took turns sitting with their mother, saying private goodbyes that would remain sacred to them forever. George, with a wisdom that seemed to come naturally to him, thanked Kate for teaching him how to be strong while staying kind. Charlotte promised to take care of her brothers and to remember all the lessons her mother had taught her about being a good person. Louis simply climbed into bed beside Kate and fell asleep holding her hand, his small body curled against her side. On the morning of the summer solstice, as dawn light filled the room with golden promises, Kate's breathing became increasingly shallow. William called softly to the children, and they gathered around her bed one final time. There was no panic, no desperate fighting against the inevitable. Instead, there was peace, acceptance, and love so powerful it seemed to transform the very air they breathed. Kate's eyes opened one last time, finding William's face and holding his gaze with love that seemed to transcend physical limitation. Her lips moved slightly, but no sound came. The final words were spoken in the language of love that had carried them through their entire relationship, communication beyond words that expressed everything that mattered. As the morning sun climbed higher, casting the room in ethereal light, Catherine, Princess of Wales, slipped away as gently as she had lived, surrounded by everyone who had made her life meaningful. Her passing was so peaceful that for a moment, no one was certain it had happened. Then, William leaned forward and kissed her forehead one final time, and the children understood that their mother's long journey was complete. The silence that followed was sacred, broken only by quiet tears, and whispered words of love. There was grief, of course, profound and lasting, but there was also gratitude for having witnessed such grace, such dignity, such a perfect example of how to live and how to love and how to say goodbye without ever really saying goodbye at all. In the days that followed, as the world learned of Kate's death and millions mourned the loss of their beloved princess, those who had been present in her final moments carried with them the knowledge that love could indeed conquer death, not by preventing it, but by transforming it into something beautiful, something meaningful, something that would continue to inspire long after the last breath was taken. The wordless goodbye that had begun months earlier was finally complete, but its echoes would reverberate forever in the lives of 3 children who knew they were cherished, a husband who understood the true meaning of partnership, and a world that had witnessed what it meant to love completely and let go gracefully. Kate's legacy would live on not just in the formal monuments and charitable foundations that would bear her name, but in the everyday acts of love and kindness inspired by her example. She had shown that even in life's darkest moments, grace was possible, dignity could be maintained, and love could transform the unbearable into something sacred. The story of William and Kate's wordless goodbye had touched millions because it revealed universal truths about love, loss, and the courage required to live fully even when time is limited. In choosing to love completely right up until the end, they had given the world a template for how to face life's greatest challenges with grace and how to say goodbye in ways that honor rather than diminish the love that made the farewell necessary. Their goodbye was wordless because the deepest truths need no words. They're communicated through presence, through touch, through the choice to remain open to love even when love guarantees pain. In the end, Kate and William had shown that the greatest goodbyes are not about endings at all, but about love so profound that it transcends even death itself, continuing to shape and bless the world long after the final breath is taken.